Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our Fieldstone4U. I'm the Executive Director with Fieldstone Leadership Network, Orange County, and Robin Stropko is on the call. Robin, wave to everybody. Robin is the other Robin. We make it as confusing as we possibly can. So it doesn't matter. If you send something to her by accident, she sends it to me and vice versa. So we make sure that we're completely in the loop on what the other one's doing. So we're really excited that you're on this call today. I want to give you a little bit of history about Fieldstone4U. That came about absolutely from COVID. Robin and I sat down and really strategized and thought, what can we do to continue to be that conduit for our nonprofit leaders? Uh-oh. Somebody's sharing their screen. I don't know who. Can somebody unshare that? Okay, thank you. Anyway, so the history of the Fieldstone4U. So Robin and I came together and wanted to know how we could continue to be the conduit for our nonprofit leaders to come together during these times. And so we thought, what better way than to do video conferencing on an as-needed basis. And so we started getting requests right off the bat for obvious issues like SBA loans and some of the things that were pressing right away. And so we brought in a couple employment attorneys and we brought in an SBA specialist. And so this came about because Kevin Furman, who you're going to hear from, he's the Director of Fund Development at Blind Children's Learning Center. He said, what about if we have just a fund development one and we bring a panel together? So that's the genesis for this particular Fieldstone4U. So it's a little unique in that I'm not going to be facilitating. When I'm finished talking, you're not going to hear from me again. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, who will moderate the discussion. So I'm very excited that that's how this format is going today. As I said, we will be recording it. If you'd like a version, make sure you email Robin. Some housekeeping. I just ask that you mute your computers right now so that we don't have any background noise. So I totally understand you've got little ones and animals and we love seeing them. Sometimes it's just a little distracting to hear them. My dog included. She tends to be a yapper, so I will mute myself as well. We do have a series of questions and some really thorough, comprehensive questions. So I'm pretty sure most of your questions will be answered through the questions that will be presented to our panelists. If they are not, by the end of the conversation, if we still have time, please enter your questions through the chat and I'll make sure that Kevin gets them and he can direct them to the person. If it's to anybody, make sure you clearly identify that in your question, that it's for any of the panelists. If it's for a specific panelist, then please make sure that you direct it to that person and we'll make sure that they get it. So that, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Kevin. We're going to try to keep this to an hour. Some of our panelists have to leave, and I know Kevin's aware of that, but some of us can stay on after for Q&A and just for general networking among your peers if you would like. So Robin and I and Kevin are available to stay on after. So Kevin Furman, again, Director of Fund Development at Blind Children's Learning Center. It's all yours. And Kevin, thank you again for being so innovative and asking us to do this and making it happen.
Well, thank you for allowing the opportunity and creating the space for us to do this. As a fundraiser, I feel a mixture of enthusiasm as well as areas of insecurity. And I imagine everybody on this call shares their own balance of those feelings. And while nobody has the crystal ball solution, we really felt that speaking with experts who have really thrived and made it through past crises such as 9/11 or the Great Recession have wonderful historical knowledge and insights that can really be constructive for everybody here when making important decisions and areas that they're going to prioritize for the forthcoming couple months, 6, 12, 18 months and beyond, because the tail of this is going to be with us for a while. So on the call, we're very grateful to have 4 panelists today. We have Candy Davidson Goldbraun, the Associate Senior Vice President of Foundation Operations for Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Thanks for waving. Everybody can do that when I introduce them. We have Susan Kenny, the Chief Advancement Officer for Court-Appointed Special Advocates, Orange County. We have Farrell Hirsch, the Chief Executive Officer of Muckenthaler Cultural Center. Hi. And Taryn Palumbo, the Executive Director of Orange County Grant Makers. Thank you all for being here. I am going to quickly give you a moment to each introduce yourselves before we get into these questions. We have a fair amount of questions to get through during this time, but I know that you are all very capable of digesting a lot of information, and we will of course have this recording for afterwards if you need to go back to it. So we'll try to move relatively quickly so that we can cover a lot of bases here. So Candy, I'll start with you quickly introducing yourself and then go on to Susan.
All right, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to join this panel. As Kevin mentioned, I'm currently at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And prior to that, I was a consultant for 5 years with a firm called CCS Fundraising, a mixture of campaign work and executive work on the administrative side. And prior to that, I was at UCLA Health for 8 years, and that was during the Great Recession, as they call it. I just called it a recession myself. I'll go back further. I started my career in athletics. And then moved to the arts. And while I was in the arts, we had a few bubbles burst. So I am either fortunate that I've spent my whole entire career with these things, but I'm really excited to join everybody and to be able to share my learning experiences.
Thank you, Candy. Susan?
Hi, everyone. Oh, can you hear me? Was that me making that sound?
I think you're okay now.
Okay, good. So, hi, everyone. Thank you very much for including me in this panel. Kevin and I had a chance to talk last week, and I think it's because I'm been around for so long that I got this opportunity. I've been fundraising for 17 years. Started with the Muscular Dystrophy Association, with them for 11 years. Spent some time with the Child Abuse Prevention Center, and then was with the Ronald McDonald House for 4.5 years, and now I'm with Cova, Court-Appointed Special Advocate. And I have been through obviously several very challenging fundraising years. The very first year I started in fundraising with MDA, our largest national partner, there was a grocery strike, and so whether that and also 9/11, the recession, and now this, I'm looking forward to sharing some of my experiences. Obviously, everybody, we've never experienced anything like this before, but it's come with some silver linings for a lot of us, and I'm grateful to share what I can. So thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Before I move on to Farrell, it looks like we may have a little bit of a connectivity issue with your connection. So just to try to ease up some bandwidth, we're going to ask everybody except for our panelists just to temporarily stop their video to see if that helps matters. But we can move on. So Farrell, hi.
Good morning. I think, by the way, my name is Farrell and I am the CEO of the Muckenthaler Center. I think I might be here as sort of the outsider voice or the iconoclast voice. I don't have a long storied history in fundraising. I never worked for or at a not-for-profit until 3 years ago when I retired. I had previous to that, for 15 years, I was an executive at SiriusXM satellite radio. My job was launching new radio networks. Before that, I was a Broadway writer and a producer. And while we raised funds for Broadway shows, not the same as doing it for this. In between, I worked with the coaching staff of the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. So I've had a really disparate, interesting background, which I've brought here. So I think I may have a very, very different view of how we do fundraising. It's not It's not the standard way. I think I may have the complete opposite answer or suggestions or paths that everybody else on the panel is going to say. So they're right, I'm wrong, but let's have fun.
Well, that's okay. We need diverse perspectives, so
Yes.
all welcome. Taryn, hi.
Hi, everyone. Taryn Palumbo. I'm the Executive Director of Orange County Grantmakers. Thank you so much for having me. I'm not a fundraiser, so I'm here to provide a different perspective. My organization represents some of the largest funders and philanthropists in Orange County. We have over 35 of the corporate, private, family, and community foundations as members. So I support this diverse group to provide a space for convening and to really serve as the voice of philanthropy for Orange County as a whole. My background, I'm actually an attorney by training. So I escaped that immediately after law school and taking the bar, and went into working into public policy and government affairs for 8 years. My perspective is, and what I try and bring to the organization is to represent not only the voice of philanthropy, but to be advocate for the nonprofit community on behalf of philanthropy. So I'm excited to share what we're doing and how we are trying to support nonprofits through this process. But I'll share when I was, I just graduated law school at the height of the Great Recession, and it was a fabulous time to try and find a job. And so that's what kind of led me to my career path.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you all again for being here, and let's go ahead and get right into these questions. So our first couple are to you, Taryn. Can you tell us, generally speaking, what Orange County is doing to respond to the COVID crisis from a philanthropy standpoint, and then more specifically about the Orange County Resilience Fund that you're involved with?
Yeah, so generally, Orange County, I've been more proud to be working with philanthropy and nonprofits in Orange County than ever before. And I think, obviously all of you are on the ground and you know that, but Orange County has responded with just an immediate surge of innovation and collaboration. And we're hearing stories every single day of nonprofits banding together, nonprofits and other organizations, community organizations, finding a way to turn all their programs virtual in like 2 days when they maybe didn't even have like a strong website before. And all of a sudden they're serving their constituents and their customers and their clients in a virtual platform immediately. And so it's been really kind of extraordinary to see how the nonprofit community, how the philanthropic community has come together. On the philanthropic side, there's been kind of two big waves. One, the first way that a lot of philanthropy is supporting the nonprofit community is by trying to work with existing grantees to make the funds that are available already, the relationships that already exist, as flexible as possible. So we've seen a lot of our funders changing, when at all possible, to unrestricted grants, letting program dollars be used for general operating, just trying to have conversations with the grantees about what do you need now and how can we support it. And that's for the existing relationships, which I can talk about a little later, but it's just kind of goes to this idea of the close kind of conversation that exists between funders and nonprofits and what we try and work on and support. And I think that's always a process that, is being undergone and trying to grow. But this situation in particular has provided a really strong basis for exploring and growing that trust-based philanthropy, because grantees are having to come to the funders and saying, look, I have a program grant for $50,000 and I have no children to serve. What does that mean now? And so the funders have been very, very open, working with their boards and the people they report to say, look, we cannot keep things quite so narrow anymore. We have to expand how we're supporting and look at what support actually means. So that's the first thing that's happened, is the relationship between grantees and grantors has become much more open and much more flexible. Now, we know that not all funders are able to do that. Again, funders report up to boards. They have endowments that they're dealing with. They have dollars that are restricted no matter what. But when at all possible, they're trying to do that. And then the other way is we're seeing pooled funds come into play. So there are three kind of big ones. The Orange County Community Resilience Fund, which I'll talk about in just a second. United Way has their Pandemic Relief Fund. United Way is a member of ours. They're also doing amazing, amazing work. Their fund has a big focus on homeless services and trying to make sure that those who are right on the brink are able to access dollars to make sure to pull them back from the edge. So whatever that looks like, getting support out to families, getting support out to nonprofits that are supporting that process. I believe, and I don't work for United Way, so I can't quote the most accurate numbers, but the last time I checked in, they were at $1.5 million in that pooled fund. And that comes from everybody. That's coming from the community. It's coming from donors, from corporate, from private. The Anaheim Community Foundation also has a pooled fund specifically for Anaheim, and that's also looking at supporting Anaheim-based nonprofits and organizations to make sure they're keeping their community strong. So if you have any questions about those two, I'm happy to direct you to the right people. The Orange County Resilience Community Fund is an effort that was started by the Orange County Community Foundation, Charitable Ventures, St. Joseph's Community Benefit, and Orange County Grantmakers. To date, we have raised $3.6 million for nonprofits, which is extraordinary. The initial goal was $2 million, and we exceeded that in like a week and a half. The goal is to support three basic areas: community clinics, individuals, and then nonprofits with general operating support. And so far, there have been 2 rounds of grant making gone out. We've given, I think, about $2.5 million out so far. Or maybe a little less than that, maybe around $2 million so far. But the idea is to support those organizations that are needing emergency assistance right now, and that exceeds whatever they already had in terms of grants, those relationships that they already had with the nonprofits. So we're talking about general operating, we're talking about being able to provide housing, food, keeping people away from homelessness, those kind of first round emergency needs. And then the second round of grants was expanding on that a little bit. And then the third round will go even further. So the reason why I am speaking first is because I have to jump off this call at about 11:52-ish, because we are hosting a webinar for, at this point, 290 nonprofit leaders here in Orange County from 12 to 1 to dive deep into the OC Community Resilience Fund, what that looks like, what some of that granting has been, and the community needs assessment that came out of it. So I'm not going to take up more time here. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but just know if you have time and you want to jump on that, registration is still open so you can learn all the nitty-gritty that you wanted to know from 12 to 1 today.
That's fantastic. If there's a link that you're able to put into the chat window for people to follow, that would be excellent.
Let me do that right now.
Thank you, Taryn. Our next question is for both Candy and Susan. So, following a crisis, describe for us how you overcame or are overcoming resistance to fundraising. Obviously, fundraising during an economic crisis has a lot of sensitivities and complexities to it. So we'd love to hear how you're addressing any potential resistance to that concept.
Great. Well, first I'll talk about the past, and then I'll talk about what we're doing currently at Children's Hospital. First, the past, when my first recession bubble hit, I worked for a regional theater in San Diego, and because the arts a lot of times is hit hard and people don't kind of turn to them, we really worked with our board to loosen up dollars that they might have had as restricted. We looked at, we did an analysis of all our restricted funds and go back to a number of our donors to talk about releasing some of those restricted funds, percentage of them into unrestricted to be able to pay salaries for staff, including, and then also on the business side, looking at furloughs and flex plans reduction. The bigger, greater recession plan, I was at UCLA Health, and oddly enough, for me, that was probably one of the better fundraising years I ever had, and mostly because I really was able to take the mission and talk to my donors and really compel with them that the need, and that there were a lot of smaller donors who stopped giving, and the medium-sized donors to really super small donations, those $25, $50, those kept coming in. That wasn't my portfolio, but we knew that. But really it's kind of those, that mid-tier major gift donors. Those are the ones who really constricted their giving. Or wanted to delay payments. So going to our major donors and those who are very deep-pocketed philanthropists and talking to them about this restriction and being very open and honest with them and getting them to understand the need overall, and be able to really take, and for me, I think the biggest part is really talking with your program staff and finding hard cost. So right now, what at Children's Hospital we did is, being in a healthcare facility, and everybody wants to help with masks and everything. It's like, okay, what are those costs? What are the actual hard costs that we have? It's just not the mask, but in a hospital you have gowns and HVAC suits, various different equipment. So getting the hard cost of everything. The other piece that we're doing is we're paying for 3 meals a day for all of our hospital staff who are on site. So getting those hard costs, that's between $17,000 and $25,000 each meal, and being able to go to our you're feeding a couple thousand, 2,200 meals in the hospital around, and talking to your donors. So finding different ways to connect with them, and maybe they can't do 22,000, but they said, hey, I can do 5, let me go talk to some friends. And we're fortunate, about 25% of all meals that we're supplying to the hospital are being supplemented by philanthropists. We also worked really closly with catering that we use for galas and special events. And really, it's a win-win, because those vendors, they've told us we wouldn't have jobs right now. I wouldn't be able to pay my staff if it wasn't for CHLA coming in and paying and buying these meals. So really working with our community in various different ways. I think that's the biggest piece. But as I was thinking about that question, I wrote down a number of notes, but at the end of the day, when I think about the program staff, my boss, the board of directors, individual donors, fundraising committees, it comes down to empathy, compassion, communication, transparency, and honesty. I have a staff of 31, and, in the beginning, I would listen to them, and mostly it's the whole point that I would go back to them is just saying, I understand, I empathize, I'm feeling it too. And allowing that wall to come down a little bit to show that you're human, and it really becoming the human side, and doing the same thing with my donors, even more so than I've done before. Susan?
So I was incredibly fortunate, I guess you could say, to be working for the Muscular Dystrophy Association during all of these 9/11, the recession, because MDA had a model where the fundraising was more grassroots, more attainable for the general population. It wasn't, these stocks that I worked in was not a big gala driven office. We were focused on these customer ask programs, where you go into the grocery store and, they say, would you like to buy a shamrock to help send a kitty camp, or the firefighters work up on a national level, and they'd be standing on the street asking for people to fill the boot. And that actually worked in our benefit because during 9/11 and firefighters are out there filling the booth, people didn't care what they were fundraising for. They were just throwing money at these guys, right? Because they wanted to support, you know, our firefighters. And so what I took from that experience to CASA is that CASA is very well known for their very amazing fundraising events. The gala, holiday lunch, and which raises lots of money, and it has been a challenge for us because of that. But to give the opportunity for people to be able to give at whatever level that they want. So we have a pinwheel project. We did a match. People want to give, right? So they are going to give, and if they can give you $1, or if they can give you $1,000, it's their comfort level, but you gotta ask them to give. So
Hey, Sue.
I didn't have a lot of heartache, I guess, during that specific time.
Sue, can you hear us?
I just muted her, so.
Okay, Sue, we're having some connection issues. We have a few more questions before we return to you. So if you do have an area that might have better reception, you might want to explore that at the moment, but we're going to move on for now. But I think the takeaway from Susan's response there was that it's all about finding opportunities for giving at every single level so that you can meet people where they are at. Our next question is going to be for Pharrell. What is the process you have used or are using to build your development team with limited resources? I think we're all limited right now.
There certainly are limitations. I would never, it's a phrase that I don't like. I live in the same world as everybody else. If you know, the same raw materials on this earth that exist for Microsoft, if they have to go make money, exist for me at the Muckenthaler. So I'm not denying reality. I'm just saying that the mindset, when you go chase it, has to be different. I could never start with, what can I do despite this? Or what can I do with limited resources? It's just, what can we do? So 3 years ago, I inherited a company that had been around since 1965. The Muckenthaler Foundation started in 1965. And we have never, ever in that time had anybody, not a single person working in development, working as a grant writer, working to raise money, working with donors, nothing. So really the idea of how to build that has been, what are we doing? Now, that's not saying we never wrote grants or never had donors. We didn't have anybody specifically dedicated to that. And I think that's a mistake. And I actually, I want to say, I learned it through CCS. A gentleman named Chris Looney wrote a paper for us. So what I did was I took a year and a half, and remember I said, I've never worked in this field before. I don't know anything about it. So I went to everybody I could find who knew something about it. And I said, teach me. I don't want to just start willy-nilly. I knew it had to change. I didn't know how to change it. So here we are. Fast forward, I sat with 25, 30 people who knew this stuff inside out, who could give me great advice. And I think what most people would have done was say, who's the best person I could find, the best person I can find in my price range who does development work, and I can bring them in and let them create a department, bring me somebody brilliant. We decided to go the exact opposite or inverse of that, which was first create the department. So in other words, we didn't have the proper software. We had no donor tracking software. We had really no records whatsoever. We had no aims. We had no goals. And if I brought someone in, how could I even judge whether they would do a good job or whether they are doing a good job? So first I had to educate myself, and then I had to build the infrastructure. Because rather than bring someone in and have them spend the first 9 months on salary creating a world, we went out, we made a deal with Blackbaud, and we're using their All True system. And we're still in their learning phase, but that's coming soon. And right now, in the middle of coronavirus, we're about to announce hiring. We're going to start hiring people. We are looking. But that's the mindset here. One of the things that I think we do differently than most other places is we made a commitment. We shut down on March 12th. On March 15th, I made a commitment to our constituency that we will launch one new program every week. For as long as coronavirus lasts, we will launch a new program every week. And our first week was, we have these Tuesday morning kiosk with art kits. 500 families a week come and they pick up these art kits, and we've got a lot of press for that. The next week we started a mask and shield building program. We do about 5,000 a week. We've got a drive-in movies. That's the next one I'm announcing. We're going to start doing drive-in movies. We found a way to do that safely. We've got 16 programs. Hopefully this doesn't go longer than 16 weeks, but we're going to launch 16 new programs. And you say, what does that have to do with fundraising? I'm going to say this. We have a rule here. We never ask people for money. We never say, give us money because we're good or we're cool or we're fun or we help people. It's give us money for this. So March was the best fundraising month in the history of this organization, and April will be better. And that's without ever asking for money. If you go backwards, we've spent the last 3 years making personal connections with everybody we can. It's personal, 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 personal. So they know us and they trust us. And now I say, we're launching this program for the kids. We're doing it. It's costing us $500 a week. If you'd like to join, or you'd like to sponsor a week, push the button. And we raised about $50,000 in $500 increments in 10 days without ever saying, just give us money. It was sponsor this program. And that's where I think you have to start with both audiences, with individuals, and even with grant writing and philanthropy. And be building, be launching, be growing. Again, other than the Resiliency Fund, which had a different mindset, which had a different launching point. They're looking for people who, at first, people who were struggling and people who needed the help and the step up. Other than that, everything we applied to has thrown money at us. We devised and announced a program for first responders who may be suffering from PTSD and their families. And we're going to start that in July. And we've already got the first 3 years of it funded because people want answers and not just, please give me money. People want to invest in something specific. Did I even get close to answering the question?
No, I think that actually hits out at a great point, and it mirrors what Candy was mentioning earlier regarding being very granular and clear about the need that you present so that people can wrap their heads around it. So thank you. Actually, back to Candy. Can you share an example of a successful solicitation that you've made during a crisis? It could be this crisis, it could be a past one, and share a little bit about the message that was used for your board, donors, volunteers, and so forth.
Yeah, I'll share a past one and then a quick one from this crisis as well, because I think it's parallels on two different levels. The first I'll talk about is when I was at UCLA, and that was during the Greater Recession, and I worked on the health side, and the end of the gift. I'll just pair it with the donor was an annual giving donor, donations of $5,000 annually for about 17 years. we couldn't find any other affiliation. Anytime I've tried to talk to this person, they kind of just said, oh, you don't need to talk to me. You know, we felt there was capacity. We could find 2 homes, but never really wanted to reach out and connect. And then during the recession, I thought, let me just try one more time. And my whole approach during the whole recession was, I was just sending information that would be pertinent about healthcare during the recession. So making sure that you get your physicals. If you lost your insurance, where are those resources that you can receive, you know, insurance or healthcare, you know, be it the Venice Family Clinic or other care. Also the services at UCLA that had sponsored. So I just sent this person an email outreach and shared, and they responded saying, you know, tell me a little bit more about this this uninsured piece. And so we, you know, he would not pick up the phone. It was like voicemail after voicemail. I would leave a voicemail. Finally, I just started leaving my voicemails longer and longer, of just like having these like 30-second pitches every single time. And finally he called me and said, hey, I have a doctor's appointment. Why don't you meet me after? And he's like, I think there's still an ice cream shop. Let's meet. And I said, okay, which I thought was really funny. So in other words, he did not want to meet very long. So we met for ice cream. He wanted more information about, you know, uninsured population, and I talked to him, and then I started talking to him about the emergency department. And that's where we would see a lot of increase of individuals. And because one of the complaints he had about our services was the wait at the emergency department, because somebody he knew had just been there and it had to wait a while. And I said, well, part of the reason is because when people don't have insurance, they wait longer and longer to go see a doctor, or they might not go. And instead they have an emergency, they end up in the emergency department. So the ED doctors are now not just focusing on that broken leg, they're also focused on diabetes and 5 other things that should have been taken care of. So he got very inspired in that. So he said, okay, how about let's make another appointment? I said, okay. So we made another appointment for the next week, because he had a follow-up appointment. And this time I brought one of our emergency room doctors and the chief of nursing, because the emergency room doctor, he's really great, but not the best bedside manners. But my chief of nursing, she was one of those people that like could sell ice cubes to an Eskimo. So I thought, okay, let me get the 2 that I can. After that meeting, he said, okay, I really want to support this. Send me a proposal. So I tried getting a number from him and he wouldn't get me. So I did a $2 million ask. He sent a $2 million transfer of money next day. We continued the conversation, and in the end, he supported that program for about a total of $10 million within about 18 months. So success of just continuing, making sure you engage with donors at all levels. Currently at Children's Hospital, we're working with a number of people who are reaching out who want to make in-kind gifts. They have, they want to donate gloves and so forth, and we're accepting them. One of the first people, an older lady who made all these hand masks, and at CHLA, we're just not, at the time, we're not taking handmade. So we, I called her, I told her, thank you so much. We're just not able to take these right now, but if our policy changes, I'll reach out to you. She sent a note, thanks, he sent me an email, thanks. 2 weeks later, she sent, masks that she bought, hand to me with like 2 bottles of hand sanitizer, like literally just the small ones. I wrote her just like a quick little, thanks so much. And now this is like, what, 4 weeks later, she and I are talking about her very first cash gift, and she's talking about between 10 and 15,000 as her first gift. And really, it's just, I didn't do anything more, than I would for anybody else. When I started talking to her, just the first few times, her voice just reminded me of my grandmother's, to be honest. So every time I could, I just would call her and I'd be like, hey, I got your package. Thanks so much. But really, I think the big piece of it is just keeping people engaged, even when you don't want to ask for anything. And the other thing is people are wanting to help in different ways. And, so what if it's, they can only send 1 box of mask or, 1 bottle of something. If you continue to keep them engaged, when they are able to give you financially, they will. So those are my 2 stories. One a very big gift, one, medium.
Yeah, that's excellent. Susan, it looks like you've got your connection working, so thank you for doing that. Can you, on the kind of converse side, share a not so successful solicitation that you've made in the middle of a crisis? It happens. We should all be getting those sometimes, but we'd love to hear your perspective.
Oh gosh, I don't know that I was prepared to answer that question, but I would think. Can I go back really quickly to what I was trying to say before?
Sure.
And then back. So I just, I apologize everybody for that. So if you can give people the opportunity to give at any level during these time frames, people will rise to the occasion. And so people want to help. And so not everybody can give, $5,000, $10,000, but when I was with the Muscular Dystrophy Association during all of these crises, the main form of fundraising was asking people at a grocery store, would you like to send a child to camp? And it was either $1 or a $5 ask. During 9/11, we were very fortunate to be able to have a relationship with the International Association of Firefighters, and while they were fundraising for MDA, people didn't really care what they were fundraising for. They wanted to support firefighters, but it was just an ask to fill the boot. It could have been change, it could have been a $1 bill, it could have been a $100 bill. So during these time frames, if you can create opportunities that are very just give whatever you'd like to give, I think people will support you in that way. At CASA, just recently, we were sort of terrified to ask people. Terrified's a big word, dramatic word, but we didn't think it was appropriate to be asking for people to support us, just like everybody else at the very beginning. And so, but we had an opportunity, we had to postpone our gala. And I knew that there was going to be a donor at the gala who was going to be giving during the paddle raise. So I went to her and I just said, hey, we want to inspire some folks to give to us. Would you mind if we were to use the money that you were going to be giving to the event and use it for a match? And she said, absolutely. And people rose to the occasion, something that we hadn't done at this time frame of the year normally. We usually would only do a year-end appeal. And we sent it out to our constituents, which you guys have probably have done as well. But again, people rose to the occasion. We had anybody from giving $10 all the way up to a $20,000 gift. So essentially, we raised over $70,000 that we wouldn't typically have raised at this time of the year, because we had sort of shifted a gift that was going to be given at another time or at an event. So maybe something to consider there. So, oh gosh, I get no's all the time. So to be able to have somebody to pinpoint a direct ask that didn't go that well, I don't know that I can. But in regards to resistance was the original question too. I majority of my career has been in healthcare. And now I'm with CASA. So then obviously we are all working to support the people that we serve. There is resistance that I've run up against from program staff. We can't ask our families to get involved. We can't ask our volunteers to do more than they already are doing. And so it's been a little challenge between fundraisers and the program staff, because the absolute best fundraisers for us are the people that are receiving the services. So if you can ask, without being pushy, obviously, but ask the people that you're serving to be able to be spreading the word that what they did, share their story. This is what they did for me. They still need our support. They still need you to help. I do that if you can. It is, like I said, they are the best fundraisers for you. And if they don't want to help or they can't help, then they won't, or, and make sure that your program, or excuse me, your fundraising staff or your development staff are working in concert with your program team to make these asks so that people don't feel pressure, and there shouldn't be any pressure. But if sometimes the only way somebody feels like they can do something is to fundraise. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And technology makes that so possible with peer-to-peer fundraising. So that's an excellent suggestion. Taryn, I know you have to hop off the call in a few minutes. So I'm going to direct this next question to you. What key principles do you want everyone in their organizations or your organization to understand about philanthropy and fund development right now?
Sorry, forgot to unmute myself. I think echoing what both Candy and Susan have said, the most important thing right now is to continue that relationship with the funders. So it's that continued ask that you mentioned. We know that there may not be enough dollars right now to support every single ask that's out there in the community. I believe that the OC Community Resilience Fund got about $12 million in asks for its $3.5 million. It's terrible. We wish we could support everything, but it's just not possible. So one of the things that we're encouraging is the relationship with the funder, that continued just ping of, hey, did you hear what I had going on? Did you hear what I'm doing? That is the most important and most valuable thing you can do right now. So if you have a relationship with a funder, it might not be asking for money, because they might already have given you the grant money for the year, and you may have already applied for the Community Resilience Fund, and maybe you did or did not get funding, and whether or not you did or did not, it might not cover what you need, and we know that. But what you can continue to do is not emailing the funders and saying, hey, can I please have some more money? It's, hey, I partnered with this other organization and we're doing XYZ, and we just wanted to let you know that we have that going on right now. That is going to go so far right now in encouraging both an open relationship back and forth, because, by the way, the funders want to know that. There is no greater story that the funder can share with their board to convince them to give them more money to give out to the community than a feel-good story like that. So the more you can keep that communication open, the more you can just say, here's how we've pivoted. Or like you were talking, the idea of people who are receiving services are the best ambassadors. A quick story of this client came in and they got these services and this is what it meant to them. Just send that off. No ask, no anything else, just keeping that line of communication open, because I gotta tell you, nothing makes a funder feel better than knowing that these dollars that sometimes are just giving out have had real world impact. So if you're able to keep that story going, even at a time when maybe the actual dollars are getting limited and are tight, that's going to go a really long way in maybe a year when another round of grant funding comes out. They're going to say, hey, I remember now, that organization during COVID, they pivoted, they partnered, they told me stories. I love that. I want to reach out to them and have a conversation. So if anything, I can share anything. It's just this idea of building trust and conversation. And that has to come from the funder side as well. And we know that, and that's a conversation that's going on in our community as well. With that, I do need to jump off the call. I did see somebody mention that they didn't get the Zoom link yet for the call at 12. Just so you know, it should be through the Eventbrite link. So if you go there, that's how you should be able to get it. You just sign on to the event. And I hope to see some of your smiling faces among the 290 people that I will be joining our call in a second. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Taryn.
Taryn.
And for everyone, that link is on the chat log, and we'll try to get through the rest of our questions as quickly as possible in case you want to join that. Farrell, you mentioned on it earlier, but can you just briefly address your philosophy on relationship building and how you feel that's going to promote your organization's sustainability in the forthcoming months?
Yeah, sure. The most important thing that you're going to hear on this call today is something that everybody except me has said already, but I just want to make sure it's unanimous. It's about relationships. Even when you're not asking for money, be in touch and get information flowing back and forth. That is the groundswell of everything you do. So you can ignore everything I'm going to say, and some of you will want to, because I'm gonna go a little off kilter here. I like to find weird analogies and different kind of ways to put things in perspective for me. In my radio career, I did a lot of strange things, and I ended up broadcasting a lot from brothels, legal brothels, in Nevada, where it's okay. But I learned a lot about the way the women made money there. They're trained in a very, very specific way, and they call it the hustle. And the principles of the hustle translate extremely well to fundraising. And that's not to demean fundraising. And I know that's, some people are going to be offended by it, but learn from places that are outside of the norm and bring their education, bring their processes to you, and you'll have a new perspective. I'm telling you that I would see guys walk in to these establishments, not be the least bit interested in any of the particular merchandise on sale, and 15 minutes later, they were spending their life savings because the people in charge and the people doing the sales understood what was important and what motivated the person who had the cash. It's extremely valuable. And again, I'm not saying the girls in that establishment use their power for the betterment of humanity. I'm saying we can learn from them so we can use those techniques. And it's fascinating. All they did was talk and listen and get a sense of what that person was interested in and satisfy that need. And I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about if that person was lonely or that person needed to talk or whatever it was, they worked it until they found it and then turned it into a business deal. And I think that's an incredibly valuable model for those of us who can stomach it. And I understand it's not what everybody wants to have in their head as they're fundraising for a charity, but I've seen it and it works. And I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. The other thing, of course, is your mission statement. It's one thing I don't think's been said very much, but today, and I know everybody has it in their heads, but your mission statement informs where you should be going and what you should be doing. And one of the things that we're really strident about here, and I think I see other organizations make mistakes, your mission statement tells you where you should be and where you should be going and what is appropriate for you to do and what is not appropriate for you to do. And I think a lot of organizations make mistakes when they get off that path, and it's harder to fundraise when you're off your mission statement. And in fact, it's probably inappropriate to fundraise when you're off your mission statement. I know you asked me about my philosophy, and I tried to present it in a way that was a little different and colorful, but that's still pretty much it in a nutshell.
Well, the best news of it is that nobody's going to forget that. So I think you did your job. Thank you. Candy, other than the skills that you were required of you when you started in your position, what skills do you feel you have that have enhanced your ability to react in a crisis like this?
Yeah, oddly enough, I think some of the skills are they're the inherent of like just who I am. But as a young adult and through college, I was an athlete and played team sports all my life. So I always go back to team sports. Like, you have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to trust. You have to really have some sort of bond, even with people you don't like. You know, there's people that I played with that were teams that we just really didn't like each other, but between the lines, you know, we were simpatico, and people would look at us and talk to us and say, man, you guys must be best friends. And like, in my head, I'm like, I can't stand that person. They're just not somebody I wanted to deal with. In crisis situations, it's the same thing, right? It's principles over personalities, right? You have to get down to the principle, and the principle of what we're doing is supporting our mission. It's funny, Farrell, when you were talking about the hustle, for my whole career, I wouldn't go with the brothel, but I always say, and I learned it from my mentor, that as a fundraiser or anybody who works in an organization, not just the fundraisers, but we're just conduits between our prospects' passion and the organization's mission. And it's that same thing, just linking the two together. And I've always, throughout my whole career, I've always been that way. If I was the single development person or in a team of, you know, UCLA was the biggest shop I was in, and, you know, there was on the whole campus over 300 fundraisers. So it's that piece. But the thing that I've been telling my team, I have 31 people right now, and is just, you know, as our mission, if we think of our mission as like a redwood in the forest, where we want that to be sustained for thousands of years and a long time, but we as employees and staff, we need to be more like palm trees to be able to sway with everything, right? We can't be an oak, right? The oak, the winds come and it tears it up. So I think for me, I think the biggest things to take away is be flexible. Stand with your core. So never go after a gift that you know is just not right, or anti what your organization, or, you know, from a donor that you're just like, I don't know, gives you the creeps. And I'm sure we all have some of those. But it kind of just always go back to, you know, remembering to be empathetic to every single person, be it if they're on the front lines of the staff, if they're program staff, if they're behind the house, the janitorial crew. We just don't know, right? Like, right now we're all working from our homes, right? Like, I shouldn't be. I should be in Glendale in the 20th floor, you know, looking out at LA. And instead I'm in my home. And, you know, we've been here for a while. And I think the biggest thing, and the big thing that I keep telling my teams over and over again, we have 30-minute quick check-in calls twice a week, is let's remember that the greatest fear is the unknown, and we are all in the unknown. We don't know when this thing is going to end. We don't know when a second wave will hit, and we all know, I work in healthcare and we hear it all the time. We have, you know, 3 days a week, we have COVID meetings, right? That talking and all science that is going way above my head. And the big thing is, I tell them, we don't know what the unknown is, so let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the known, right? We know that we're safe. We know that right now our organization and our board is committed to every single staff person. Yes, we're being flexed. For those who don't work in healthcare, flex is similar to furlough, but not quite similar. We're being flexed. And we're also being asked to do things that we normally wouldn't, right? Right now I have an events team of 7 people. We don't have events going on. We have a couple that we're planning for the fall, but even those might change. So my other event staff, 5 of them, are actually coordinating meals for the hospital because the frontline teams don't have that capacity. So how can we, as the foundation and the fundraising department, who might have more time and more ideas, be able to kind of shift and do other things that we are capable of. So I think it's just really, for me, it comes down to being flexible, being of service, and whatever that looks like. If it's service to your donor, if it's service to your colleague who works in another department, you know, do that. And then the other piece is take a moment and just appreciate being able to be at home, right? Like, I know I work a ton of hours when this isn't happening, and I don't get home until 8 p.m. Well, you know what? I'm actually enjoying being home and taking my puppy for a walk in the afternoon when before I couldn't. So I think that's the big piece. I hope that answered that question for you.
Absolutely, that's really great perspective. Since we are at 12 o'clock when we would normally be concluding this, if you do have to hop off, you know, do that. I know you have a lot of things to get to, and just be sure to catch the recording for the rest of this session. For those who can stay on, we just have about 3 to 5 more questions that we really want to get to for your guys, so we're going to keep barreling on. This is actually going to be for Farrell and Susan. What's one of the toughest decisions you've had to make in the last 6 weeks, and why was it so tough?
Ooh, Susan, you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Just pointing at you.
Oh, okay, I didn't see that. You know, there were 2, and they're really way on the different. I'll tell you each quickly. One is our largest donor, who writes us, you know, 6 figures a year. This really is, I need Robin to say, yes, this is definitely not, this is private, right? All right. I have a donor who gives us 6 figures a year.
This is going to be distributed to the Fieldstone network, but that's the extent of what you'll be sharing.
I'm not using names. And he proposed to us that we start a new class for, instead of our quinceañera, for girls who are about 15, because I don't know how to say it. Because he doesn't want them learning how to drink elsewhere. He wanted to teach them how to drink responsibly at 15. And he thought it would be a good deal to do it here because he thinks it's private property, and lots of good can come of it because his wife, he's now widowed, but his wife told him a story how she was ushered into adulthood by an older woman with wine and chocolates. So clearly I can't run that class. I mean, it's the single most inappropriate thing I've ever heard in my life. Despite the stories about the prostitutes I told. We can't, it's just way, on the other hand, this guy is personally underwriting 3 of our other programs.
Yeah.
And so what do you do? And that's an incredible dilemma. Because if I don't take any money from him, we can no longer do the arts entrepreneurship project that we at elementary school for homeless children. Do I throw away that program? Do I throw away our summer arts camp for kids on the autism spectrum? Because this guy sent me a weird email. So again, we had to come up with a compromise solution where he had to understand that he wasn't allowed to be on campus when children were anymore. And he wasn't allowed to visit the sites, and he wasn't allowed to, you know, we had to make a lot of rules to ensure things, and we had to do all kinds of background checks. Has there been a history? Have there been any incidents? And we didn't find anything. And we came to the conclusion that he's probably a guy who is a little past his prime and making some strange requests that he might not even remember a week later. And so we talk to people who run his finances and say, look, we're going to continue to take some money. We want you to know there have been some issues. If you ever find something that you think is inappropriate, tell us, and we won't take money if you think we're taking advantage. So we went to the people who run his finances. So again, it's a crazy hard choice. The other one, and I do it in 30 seconds, is mowing the lawn. We got 9 acres of land, and and if you don't have money coming in, do you really want to spend $5,000 a month? And we said, no, that's one of the things we can sacrifice in this situation. And then my neighbor said I was wrong. And so you may hear in the background today, after 6 weeks, we finally got the groundskeepers back, and we're going to fight. Silly little things become the biggest decisions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was not really a fundraiser thing, but it does. Your neighbors give you money.
Yeah. Susan, what about for you?
Well, it's no different probably than what others have had to do, but the most difficult decision we did was postpone our biggest fundraising event. So that was scary. You know, it raises over $1 million for us, and we are we've already known this, but we, like most nonprofits, are so reliant on special events, and this has opened our eyes even more so that we can't be. And so there's a silver lining from all of this, that our donors are seeing that it doesn't have to be a big, expensive, labor intensive event to make sure that we can, you know, commit to serving the foster youth. So that's so far the only thing that we've had to do. We've been incredibly fortunate too, because our work, unfortunately, because of this and children being at home and being secluded and being isolated, it's challenging when they have a whole family together. It's even more so challenging when you're a foster youth. And so our CASAs, our work has gotten even more important, if you will, or even more, we've gotten more busy because we are having to be contacting these kids even more, trying to find ways to be involved in their lives so we can, keep an eye on them when a lot of eyes aren't on them. So anyway, it's opened our eyes for us to become even more creative and have very difficult conversations with donors who traditionally have only given to special events. So yeah, it's been good.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, transitioning those donors from event donors to more sustaining, transformative donors, I think, is really key at this time. Susan, I'm going to actually return to you on this next question as well. What strategies or types of donors do you plan to really prioritize to maximize the impact you can make for the forthcoming months?
Well, donor retention is super important, and it's not something that nonprofits traditionally do very well. I was recently on a webinar that said only about 43% of donors are retained. And so we have, again, another silver lining here that's presented to us, that we have more time to be able to reach out to folks and message and thank and get advice from them, rather than making asks. So we are looking at, obviously engaging our existing donors. We're going to be, Kevin, you and I had this conversation last week, that we are going to our lapsed donors as well and calling them and saying, hey, well, what went wrong, or what did we do? Obviously in an appropriate professional conversation, not so blunt as I'm saying it now, but we've been able to re-engage some people because, again, we're sharing how we've totally pivoted to put everything online. We've been sharing the stories that our advocates have been finding out about the kids that we wouldn't necessarily have heard. Excuse me, the teachers aren't out there telling us that something's going wrong. So anyway, it's been great because people are seeing that the work that we're doing is essential, and we're focusing on trying to convert people to monthly reoccurring donors as well, so that we're creating a club, if you will, for people who are our monthly donors. They're going to get a little extra love. And we're going to be promoting that on our social media channels as well, that, you know, people are doing this. We're going to be offering a specific dollar amount. It's our 35th anniversary this year. And so we're going to be promoting, why not give $35, you know, once a month in celebration of our 35th year. We're going to break that down, you know, hey, now that we're home and you're not going and buying Starbucks every single day, you can convert that into a donation, a monthly donation to us. Lots of really clever ways that you all can message that to your donors as well.
That's a really great suggestion. I just have one last substantive question and then we're going to end on a high note. Candy, what do you anticipate being your biggest challenge in sustaining development efforts over the next 1 to 2 years, and how do you feel like you're going to handle that challenge?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we're facing again is the unknown, right? The unknown of this is not just an economic downturn. This is a health crisis that is also being impacted by the finance. So the biggest piece for me that I kind of has me having more gray hair than anything is not really my donors, but my staff, making sure that I keep my staff engaged, that they're inspired. There's going to be changes coming, you know, regarding incentive bonuses or max time off, or various different HR policies that are coming that I know that they're going to take as kind of a hit. And the other thing is right now, Children's Hospital, we're in a silent phase of a campaign, and keeping our kind of our pipeline for these major campaign asks, like, you know, looking at that timeline and looking at potentially extending a year for the campaign. But really, I think it's just about motivation, both the donors and the staff, and keeping people inspired. You know, I think, yeah, the mission is inspiring itself, helping children and their healthcare needs. But I think at a certain point, the staff, if they're not engaging with donors in that same way, right? There's only so much freedom you have when it comes to having a conversation over Zoom or Skype or, you know, on the phone. And from what I'm hearing from my staff, is that, like, you know, when can I start visiting my donors again? You know, my donors are eager to see us as well. And also the impact of, we're not going to be able to have any type of site visits at the hospital anytime soon. So it's, you know, it's harder to kind of display your mission when you can't bring people to your mission. And so I think for me, that's the biggest challenge that I'm thinking about right now.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to end this on a high note, and this is just an opportunity for our panelists who are still on the call to share a moment that you are particularly proud of during this COVID crisis, related specifically to development and leadership overall. I'll start with you. Yeah. Farrell, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry. Pretty simple. We're 6 weeks, 8 weeks into this, whatever it is. We haven't laid off a single person. We lost 100% of our income and replaced it with 150% of other income. And you know, we're going to survive. Can't be prouder of anything than that.
That's amazing. Yeah. Susan?
Yeah, same thing. We haven't laid anybody off. We are actually growing. We are hoping to fill a case supervisor position when we can, we're able to do that. We have completely changed everything to be online, our information sessions as well as our training sessions. And so we're supporting these kids, and we're very excited about that. But in regards to a development standpoint, I mentioned it earlier, we took a gift that we knew that we were going to get, and and we converted it into, you know, over $70,000 in additional funding that we would not have given. We were able to promote this very generous donor. They were okay with it online. We also did it very small, slow process. We didn't throw it out there and say, hey, it's got to be done in 3 days. We did it very thoughtfully and very slowly. Yeah, we're excited that we're going to have those funds to be able to support the kids.
That's great. And Candy, I'll end with you.
Yeah, I would say the same thing about what, you know, we haven't laid anyone off, and the other piece is pivoting our staff to being able to help across the hospital in various different ways. I think that could be the best. Like, we're still fundraising. We have various, I mean, especially in healthcare, you know, we always say there's a health crisis of some sort, right? And we're just moving that. But, you know, when I look at our census, you know, we used to be at about 370 patients a night, and now today it was 240. We have over 4,000 telehealth appointments going on. So the pivot of, instead of seeing people in person and utilizing that, and from a fundraising perspective, really working with our staff, our program staff, and finding out what are those needs and those costs to be able to do telehealth, right? Like, when we first talked to them, they're like $500,000. 2 days later, $1 million. Now they're like $2.7 million. So, and being able to have that number in hand to be able to talk to donors and say, hey, this is the number. If your gift of $2.7 million will help over 4,000 patients be able to actually receive healthcare is, you know, an amazing thing. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Congratulations on that. Well, thank you. Thank each of you for participating in this webinar. I think we got through a lot of great content while we had most of our audience. And then, of course, we'll be able to send this recording for those final few questions to everybody who was on the call today. I'm just going to say thank you again and pass this back over to Robin.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. Nice job. Thank you, panelists. You know, this was so wonderful because it was, you know, we had one spectrum to the other. So I think that, you know, certainly Farrell provided a very colorful approach to fundraising, but that's Farrell, and that's why we invited him on this call, to be perfectly honest. So I think that, you know, we have to be creative and we have to dig deep. And I wrote down, you know, be launching, be growing, follow your mission statement, don't back down, be resilient, connect with your donors. It's interesting, you talk about, Candy, not being able to have site visits. Robin and I have struggled at the network because how do you raise funds for a program when you can't, you're not doing direct services, you know? So how do you bring people in and how do you engage people when you can't take them around? As the shelter I used to work at, we used to say, touch the walls, smell the food in the kitchen. You know, it's a completely different site visit when you don't have that. So it'll be interesting for Robin and me to learn from all of you. And your new way of fundraising is going to be how we need to approach it as well, and how we have been approaching it. So we're all going to have to really be creative in how we reach out to our donors. Interesting, the donor retention statistic I thought was very interesting. I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing your expertise. Gives us all a lot of food for thought as we move forward. And as Farrell said, you know, not to lay off anybody, and now 150% is just phenomenal. So it gives us all hope, it gives us all inspiration, and that's what we're all about. So thank you for giving of your time today, and Robin will be sending out the recording. And again, just very grateful for your time and your talent.
And thank you to Nancy for sticking around for the whole thing.
That's right, our lone participant. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.